folks, this is Trust in the Process. My name is Travis Fritz. This is a podcast that I am doing in order to have an opportunity to talk to brewers about brewing, where they've been, where brewing's been, where it's headed, maybe, and other interesting topics that I find appealing. So here goes with Josh Rake. Josh, it has been a while since you and I have talked even like this. But I know that you've been doing super interesting stuff, and I'm really excited that you came on today.
Yeah, it's great to see you, man. I'm super excited to have a chance to chat with you.
So, born and raised in Muskegon, right? Yes, parents. I know at least your dad was pretty firmly entrenched in the community. He worked was he a fire chief, or he worked for the fire department? Yeah.
He worked for the fire department for his entire career, and as a matter of fact, just recently retired. Yep. Oh, and then my mom owns a small business here in town as well, a daycare center, and she's run that, for the last 20 years or so. So, we've got rakes all around this town.
Yeah, I think it's not. I don't think it's too much to say that firefighting and daycare are both pretty community oriented endeavors, right?
Definitely.
Means a lot of people know your parents and, therefore know you, and kind of you develop a family name around a town like Muskegon. I know this sounds like a weird question, but because I just watched this documentary that we talked about before the show, what year were you born in?
I was born in 1992.
1992. Okay.
Yep.
So that puts in a little context for me. So
yep.
At that time, Muskegon was finding its footing is probably a generous way to say it, I guess.
I would say definitely that'd be the nicest way to put it. Right. and finding its footing for a good 20 years since then, and still,
Yeah, I think in the last 15 years, or maybe even a little bit more, it's inarguable that it really is finding its footing, right, and becoming whatever it's going to be.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, 90s, I know it was kind of like the mall and the beach, and that was kind of it. Right?
That was it. Yeah, they demolished a lot of the old historic buildings down. Muskegon has a huge history and had a lot of really cool historic buildings, and they demolished a lot of them for that mall, which, as malls do, eventually went out of business, and then that mall itself was eventually demolished and led to downtown Muskegon being a huge sandpit.
Okay, all right.
Unfortunate, yeah.
So I've been, like I said, I watched that documentary. I did some reading last night, and I know what I want to talk to you about, but I know how important Muskegon is to you, particularly with your new brewery. It's not even really new anymore, but with your brewery, and so I wanted to get a little perspective. And one of the things that came up, let's say, people that were focusing on kind of the history from maybe the 70s until now. One of the things that came up was, there were all these buildings, and it was cool because it was kind of like this logging port for a while.
Yep.
And so there was money there, and there were these cool old buildings and all that. So that got demolished. As you said, the mall went up. But one of the things that came up all the time was parking lots. They were like, man, they just tore down buildings, and it was all parking.
For sure, yeah.
And there's snow fencing up because the sand is blown around these empty parking lots in the city, and it's just what is going to happen, right?
Yeah, a little post-apocalyptic there, yeah.
Right. So what did happen eventually, right? And I'm going to say this is from what I read, around maybe early 2000s, 2003 or whatever. A couple, sort of corporate entities and individuals started putting money back into that area where the mall was and surrounding areas, focusing on culture. And it's interesting to me to think about, and we'll talk about beer here in a minute, but it's interesting. It's interesting for me to think about how, one of the things I read was essentially Sears Roebuck pulling out of the mall.
Yep.
Was what sort of precipitated all of this, right?
For sure, yeah.
And I don't know if it was a conscious response from folks there or maybe a subconscious just reaction or whatever. But when I go to Muskegon now, it's not at all about, some corporate entity from somewhere else is driving money into Muskegon. It feels like it's largely a bunch of people from there saying, let's not wait around for someone else to save us here. Let's save ourselves and sort of develop this into something that is as unique and interesting as the geographic placement of Muskegon and its history and the people that live there. And I know that sounds a little overblown, but it's fascinating to me.
No, I totally agree, and I think that you hit the nail really on the head with that. For the longest time, like I said, when I was growing up, there was nothing to do in downtown Muskegon. We had one big summer festival, you would go down there for that festival, Muskegon Summer Celebration, and then beyond that, there was nothing to do in downtown Muskegon, and it does really tie back into the brewing industry, and part of the reason that I have always had the beer industry so near and dear to my heart is because I saw what places like Pigeon Hill and Unruly opening up did to the culture of downtown Muskegon, and kind of offered a place, or sort of like an anchor for downtown for other businesses to come in and fill in the gaps around them,
Right.
And that's still happening to this day. And both of those spaces have been open for, I think, almost 10 years now, maybe 6 to 10 years or something like that. But
that sounds right.
But I really see the kind of acceleration of the growth of downtown Muskegon started happening after Pigeon Hill and Unruly. They both opened around the same time. Yeah. And I just think that the beer community or having those breweries as meeting places really helped as anchors to kind of bring more development downtown and make it a safe place to develop and invest in,
Absolutely. 18th Amendment is there. Pigeon Hill is there. Unruly is there. The Rake project is down there. I don't want to skip over sort of the impact that you guys have or had. How is the community in very general terms without, airing your dirty laundry if you have any? I'm sure you
Yeah, no, there's a lot of alcohol makers in downtown Muskegon, and even in Muskegon as a whole. We've got all the places you mentioned. There's two other distilleries that opened just a couple of years ago, Brewing and Wonderland, which are both doing awesome things in their own right. Brewing is doing really, really high-end rums, whereas Wonderland is attempting to focus on whiskeys, which is a longer-term, project. But they, but for a new startup, they've done an absolutely amazing job of representing who they are and where they want to be, as they continue to progress as a company. But anyways, at the end of the day, pretty much anybody that's involved with any of these maker companies in Muskegon, there's kind of a network of people, and we all kind of help each other out, and it really starts with some of the more established guys. I know when I first opened, I really looked to Pigeon Hill and the guys who own Pigeon Hill and the guys who work there as a huge resource, and they've never hesitated to help in any way, just like, pretty much any other brewer that I've asked for help, but even more special being from our own hometown, and
Absolutely.
Opening in the same market, very small market with them, it wouldn't be out of reason to think that they wouldn't want to really help their competitor,
Yeah, no, for sure.
But yeah, in particular for me, Pigeon Hill has always been someone that even if I don't speak to them a lot or anything like that, I always know that if there's something that I might need to lean on them for, they'll always, be able to have my back on it, and so that's been huge. And then there's other people like the Brewing. The guy who owns Brewing was very instrumental in us securing our new location that we're moving to this spring. And that was because he just wanted another like-minded business to be kind of in the same corner as him and that kind of stuff. And so a lot of it is, like you said, it's small businesses trying to kind of rub together, create enough friction to kind of make something bigger happen than the sum of us, and so it's a long process, and it's turned out to not be as easy as I thought it would be, but there's a huge network of support here and then in the industry as a whole, and that's always been something that I've always felt comfortable leaning back on, and has been a huge help for myself.
Well, and that kind of, that takes community, that breeds community. It's like a beautiful circle when that kind of thing happens, right? It just takes that kind of critical mass of people who are willing to work together, even loosely, and then that just grows bigger and bigger as more people come in. And if you can keep a kind of standard of, even an unspoken standard of kind of cooperation and all that sort of stuff, that's about as beautiful as business gets, I think. It doesn't 100%. Really get prettier than that,
Yeah, and especially in a town like Muskegon where we're trying to grow, like you said, a critical mass. The more kind of density of businesses we have in our downtown space, the more it is appealing for tourists coming here, or whatever that might be. And I think that everybody's kind of in on that, and saying like let's do what we can to make this a more dense space so that there's more options for anybody who wants to be here, because, it's not a zero-sum game, and people are going to jump around, especially if they're coming here in the summer, to see a lot of our natural our beautiful natural environment here, and so yeah, it's been a huge part of Rake as we've kind of come into existence, and I hope to someday, like you are, be one of those people that I can, offer my I don't want to say expertise, but offer my experience to younger people that want to, come in and do the same thing that I did, So
Yeah, well, it's exciting, and I don't know what kind of sociopath wouldn't want to do that, honestly.
Yeah,
You know
for
what I
sure.
mean? Like if you get a young person that's interesting, you know what I mean, and motivated and worried about the right things, and I mean, if you'd been an asshole, when you said, "Hey, man, I'm leaving to start Rake Beer Project," I'd been like, "Okay, tomorrow's your last day. Go fuck
Yeah,
yourself."
for
I mean,
sure. Yeah,
but
yeah.
you're not.
I try
And
my best. Yeah.
but you're not. And I was really excited to see what you did. And so, I think you were, God, you might have been on your honeymoon or something. But last year, around the beginning of April, Camilla like booked an Airbnb in Muskegon. It was like a little 2-day weekend, which we usually don't get.
Yeah.
That we were going to go out to Muskegon, and like a jerk, who was born and raised in Michigan but didn't spend much time in Muskegon. I was like, "Oh, sweet, where are we going?" This is for my birthday.
Yep.
And she's like, "Oh, I got an Airbnb in Muskegon," and I was like, "Oh, you did?"
What are we gonna do while we get
But of course, it was really well thought out and planned, and it was close enough. I mean, I think it was within a mile, so it was walkable to your place and a couple other places. And I got the chance to sit down and drink some of your beer, and I liked it all, and I told you that I did. And I also thought that the pub itself was cool, and it doesn't surprise me or anybody else who knows you that the people working there were cool and seemed to understand what the mission was. I think bartenders were labeling cans when we were there. That's
for sure.
right. Like that's
Yeah.
not. That's,
Yeah, nobody has any one job title for us.
Yeah.
All crew, and so everybody does a little bit of everything. Which, in the long run, I think that's the better way to go, because then they know a little bit about everything, and
Right.
they can have something more to offer our customers than somebody
Right.
who only bartends, or that type of thing. And so,
Well, and you came on at Old Nation when we were growing really fast, so it was
sure.
awesome. It was awesome to have somebody who, we could just plug you in somewhere, really wherever, and you kind of ended up on the brew house, meaning that you could have gone to the cellar. You were equally capable, and since then we have had the opportunity with a kind of moderated growth. It's just a nice, pleasant, comfortable amount of growth over the last 3 or 4 years, that we can just bring people up the way that you should do it, from the back end of the bottling line all the way up through the cellar and into the brew house potentially.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful, because it increases that cross-departmental empathy. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's different. I don't know if my experience was. It's probably anecdotal, but my experience was that when I was trying to come up through the industry, I had to kind of jump around to be able to move into the job that I wanted. And a lot of the companies, I shouldn't say that, some of the companies I worked for didn't necessarily, it didn't benefit them to move people up, because then they would just have a hole in a different department, and so when I was coming up, it was I had to move to a different brewery to get to the job that I wanted,
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It ended up allowing me to move back to West Michigan, which I really was happy about. And then when I worked for you guys, it was my favorite job, but I was still able to live in West Michigan and drive there,
Dude.
which was a whole different story. But it shows how much I really, really enjoyed that job, and
Yeah,
how well you guys treated me as an employee. And it's something I talk about all the time and try to emulate in my own business, and that.
Good.
So yeah.
Well, good. And you, because of that time as it is now, I mean, my touch on brewing is, I don't do much of it, right? I mean, I'm doing business shit all the time. So you were really close to Nate, in sales and whatever. But you were really close to Nate, who is one of my favorite people and certainly one of my favorite brewers, and as good a brewer as I know, which is a huge luxury for me, right?
For sure.
To have somebody like that around who's not only a good brewer and a good teacher and a decent communicator, but also a good leader, and can model good behavior and all that stuff. So,
well, I cut you off, but I can just remember. I remember my first couple of days working there and just being like, "Wow, this is so cool that the head brewer is here, scrubbing the floors with me and doing all the little stuff that." Sometimes if you're the head brewer, you don't normally need to do that type of stuff. And right. I just remember thinking, wow, this is really cool because New Holland, for instance, I didn't really have access to the head brewer, even though I was on the brew deck 24/7. And so it was so nice to have that and to work with people who were brewers first and not necessarily business people,
Yeah.
And so just working for you guys really opened my eyes to the opposite side of what a production brewery could be, right. and a production brewery with the touch of a brewer, and that kind of stuff. And so,
yeah, I mean, I think when you have a brewer in the cockpit, it makes a big difference, right?
100%, yeah.
And it's frustrating. And John Cole, who is, producing this podcast and doing a lot of work for Old Nation right now in sales and marketing, can attest to this. It's very frustrating for salespeople when you have a brewer-focused brewery, right?
For sure, yeah. I can totally imagine, yeah.
But that's why I do that job too, right? Because it wouldn't do for me to not understand the kind of pressure that I'm putting on one side of the company because I'm allowing the other side of the company I'm doing what I think is allowing the other side of the company to do the right thing for the beer, right?
For sure.
And if there's that representation on the production side of the company, then on the sales side of the company, there just has to be, right? I know you want to make promises on amounts, and I know you want to do this and that, but I'm not going to back engineer production to sales as long as I can, right? And that day is kind of coming soon, I think, where things have to change. But anyway. When you were here, you talked a lot about, and I've heard you talk about in other contexts, working at Jolly Pumpkin. And so, as I understand it, you started at the Gallery, which is in Portland, Michigan.
Yep, it was no longer around, unfortunately. But
bummer. Yep. Those guys came in here when we were opening up, and I don't remember why, but they chatted and they seemed cool. So you worked there and you were just kind of tending bar, keeping shop, or?
Exactly, yeah. And then just kind of fell into, as small businesses are, they needed somebody to help cleaning some of the tanks, and at that point I never homebrewed before I even got into the beer industry, so I kind of backed into it, whereas a lot of people, it was a huge passion before they get into it. I was really interested in beer and drinking beer, but But yeah, and so like any small business, they just needed someone to help cleaning the kegs and or cleaning tanks and that kind of stuff. And over time, I was able to just kind of learn the minimal amount of brewing and stuff like that, and that was what really kicked off my brewing career. I dropped out of college because I loved it so much, and luckily, my now wife was always understanding of and kind of saw the end goal. But
I got that. I always got that vibe.
She's like, man, you're dropping out of college to work for this little 1-barrel brew house or 3-barrel brew house over here. And
let's not sell it short. 3 barrels.
Yeah. So, but I just really knew that at the time that industry was so much better for where I wanted to be in the future than the path that I was kind of on at the time, which was going into political science, and I'm so glad I didn't pursue political science, because I think there's more longevity in the brewing industry, but for myself, and so.
One of the things that drew me to you, while you were here, was the sense that you, I think it's unique to not this generation. I think this has been true for every generation, by the way. But I think it's unique to meet younger folks who have a sense of responsibility to anything, really.
For sure.
A sense of responsibility to carry a torch in some way. That, you know, something has been passed down to them that they're responsible for keeping the same way to in return pass down. And I mean, follow me here. I know I'm getting a little out there, but
for sure. Yeah.
That really is something that when you see it, you're like, oh, thank God, man. Right. Here's a kid who, and I mean, you weren't a kid, but you know, here's a kid who, you know what I mean? He gets it, right? Like he gets that he has a, she gets it. She gets that she has a responsibility to her community. She gets that she has a responsibility to the centuries old culture that's happening in beer, you know, or whatever. And so I see that in your pub and the way you go about things. And I think something that's interesting for me is the friction that exists between your Nordic like beer, that Nordic table beer. And I'm saying that wrong or right?
Nope, that's perfectly. Yep, that's it.
That was great, right?
Awesome.
And I think I got that for my first beer, and Camilla got like maybe like a blood orange sour or something. And they were both really good. And so then we went to your cooler to figure out what we were going to buy to kind of take and give out and whatever. And there was a lot of stuff there. And my question is this: not is fruited sour and barrel aged stout and, you know, smoothie seltzer and whatever valid, right? I'm assuming for the sake of this conversation that it all is, right? How do you internally, when you're thinking about what to make, I know that will it sell or not comes into play, right?
For sure.
But outside of will it sell or not, or in combination of will it sell or not, how do you kind of internalize the thought process between a more traditional beer? Okay, Vikings notwithstanding, right? Still, you're going for traditional flavors, and these kind of more, I mean, as we derisively call stunt beers. What is that? How do you feel about all that?
Well, you know, this is a great question. This is probably the number one thing that I have not, I don't know if changed my mind on, but I've come to learn the reality of this entire situation over the last couple of years, and it's been kind of a hard lesson to learn. You know, when I opened up, I was trying to brew everything to, and this is going to sound ridiculous, especially to you, but I was trying to be the best on Untapped. That was like my goal. You know, I was trying to be the best.
It doesn't sound ridiculous. That sounds smart for when you're starting out.
Yeah, and we did that, you know, and I was always really proud of it. But what I saw was that those beers don't necessarily equate to high sales. You know, I mean, right. And so this last summer in particular, there was a point in the spring, you know, and a lot of my perspective is skewed from COVID. You know, most of the time that we've been open has been only can sales. We haven't really had a tap room. Jesus. You know, and so I, even what I know now, I don't know if this is the actual reality of the situation. It's just what has become apparent to me, you know, as we've gone through things. But in the spring, I was in my own bar drinking, and I'm like, man, there's nothing that I want to drink here. I don't drink a lot of sour beer. I don't drink smoothie beers. Right. You know, those types of things. And it was kind of a revelation. And I was like, if I'm thinking this and I'm the person who owns this place and makes these beers, how many people are walking out of my establishment because there's nothing that they recognize or feel comfortable with here, you know? Right. And at that time, our draft list was probably 9 of the 10 beers were sour beer, and the other thing was a kombucha, you know? Right. And so at that point, it was like, okay, I need to really, really rethink who we are, and not necessarily change who we are from like a base standpoint, but just figure out how we can do the things that I wanted to do, but make them approachable. And so that's when, you know, 231, which is our Nordic table beer that you're talking about, I believe, that's been around since the beginning, but this kind of realization has led me to make a lot more of those style of beers. And so right now, my favorite beer, and I'm so happy because I've been able to make 3 whole 10-barrel batches of it and sell them all.
Sweet, that's it.
Is our spelt Saison, and it's a lightly dry hop spelt Saison. And that's my favorite beer, and it's my favorite beer to make. It's my favorite beer to drink, and it offers something that people are not going to be terrified by when they walk in the door and look at our draft menu. Just like we also do which this could be wordy and scare people as well. But my other favorite beer to make and brew of my own is called Grow, and it's an oak aged, lightly dry hop Nordic table beer. And so in any other brewery, if I had the money to buy the equipment needed, this would be a foeder lager.
Right.
But for me, this was my way of trying to figure out how I can make that thing that I really liked with the minimal equipment that I had myself. And when we started making those style of beers, we saw our tap room was getting fuller and people were staying around for longer. And so that's been a huge thing. But at the same time, they're more approachable. But I think that it's still represents who I am as a brewer, because you look at those beers, they're still raw. Pretty much everything we do is still a raw beer, which is a throwback to old Nordic brewing techniques.
Well, okay, so you and I both know what that is, but can you briefly explain what raw beer is?
It just means we don't boil it.
Exactly.
It's a no boil beer, and
Nate and I had so much fun making fun of you about this.
Yeah, I know, but it's weird, and
to your face, by the way.
What's that?
To your face, not behind your back.
For sure, yeah, I would accept that. But it's something that I kind of stumbled into making as I was sort of researching the type of beers that I wanted to make, and after doing a whole bunch of pilot batches and all this stuff, I realized, wow, I really like this, and it offers something is similar, but it's just slightly different to give people a different perspective on, whoa, this is in any other brewery, this would just be a lager, not to diminish lagers, but here it's a Nordic table beer, and it's essentially the same thing, but it's made slightly different, and it's made with more primitive technology, which is a fancy way of saying that we don't have nice equipment,
I mean, look, I think that you talk about how this is similar to a lager, but most breweries would make it as a lager if they had the equipment and so on.
Yep.
I think it's absolutely what's necessary. It's my thought that the idea of pushing the boundary with like high IBU, for example, was pushed 15 years ago, right? I mean, it's been forever. That's not really a thing anymore. I mean, there are still pockets of people that talk about it, but it's just not really a thing.
For sure.
High ABV, similarly. I mean, I get it. There are beer geeks who trade for high ABV stouts and stuff, but really that's about the barrel and whatever weird stuff they're putting in the beer.
Yep.
Which brings it to the kind of the next phase, which is more recent, I think, which is what crazy ass kind or amount of a given thing can you put in the beer, maybe to make it taste less like beer.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. In order to sell, to get people to pay attention to you. Right. And that's what all of this was, right? It was brewers going to the people who are like, you were born in 92, so you don't remember this, but I'm sure you were aware of it. Whenever Nirvana and Soundgarden and Mudhoney and all those bands were coming out of Seattle in the early 90s, it was like almost a joke. I think it was a joke within a few years, how people were like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. And then as soon as these guys get on the radio, which at the time, of course, was the only media to get music to people, once these bands got on the radio and started charting, they were like, oh, you know what? Fuck these bands, right?
100%.
And I think that happens whenever folks are passionate about something. And it's the synergy between people that are really passionate about it and just use whatever it is, whether it's music or beer, and people that are passionate enough about it to actually do it for a living, right?
For sure.
And it's a weird, there's this kind of weird disconnect. And this is sort of what I'm getting at when we're talking about more traditional, at least tasting beer and more kind of stunty beer is, at some point you have to serve everybody, right? And so you have to serve this consumer that's really arch and fickle, and his or her their first instinct is to figure out what's wrong, right? I've been around enough breweries that I know when they're trying to they're trying to get one over on you, right?
For sure. Yep.
And that's, I don't think you're going to please that person, right?
Not for
right. I mean, you can please. No, you can please that guy if you're at a beer festival and you talk to him for 15 minutes, and then you're his favorite brewery forever, right?
Sure, yeah.
But it's the only way to please people like that is to just come out with crazy ass shit, and that can really get out of control if you let it get ahead of you, right?
Totally.
And I think we've seen that a lot in Michigan, right? Like a lot.
Sure.
So I do think it's important to do what it is that you're doing and make these kind of more traditional tasting beers. And even if I appreciate you being humble and honest and saying it's because you don't have equipment, and I know that that's true, but I also know that you could go out and get equipment if you wanted to. I have equipment that you can borrow as everybody else.
Sure.
I think that it's interesting that I'm not saying you drew a line in the stand, but you're on your own 2 feet and you're saying this is what it is, right?
Yeah.
And the sort of monologues that you're having with yourself are about, am I doing the right thing by myself for this brewery and the people that I support with it and the community, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that brewing is kind of tending toward that now. And I don't know, man. I think that it's more about a brewer. It's going to be, at least soon, more about a brewer that you can trust in terms of what they make and in terms of how they treat their people generally.
Sure.
And that includes the community that they live in. So we sell beer in 20 states now in Europe. So our community is broader than Williamston, right?
Sure.
But Williamston are the people that we can touch, right? Williamston are the people we can help load groceries into their car if they look tired, or
sure.
We can work with weekend survival kits and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, man. It's becoming a lot more dicey, right? If you're a production brewery who's trying to sell beer on the market in chains, it's weird, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't know if you know, but we dipped into some, compared to what you're doing, very, very small distribution this last year.
Good.
But for us, it was a lot of beer that we were distributing. And I think that we talked a lot. I never wanted to distribute my beer, but the reality of our tap room over the summer meant that we had to find another way to move beer, and
you did.
And we did, and it was a huge way for us to kind of keep moving forward. And but that doesn't mean that I'm not always constantly trying to figure out a way to get out of distributing for myself, because
it sucks.
It sucks, yeah. Because what happens is I'm passing something that I care about off to somebody else who the distributor we work with is great. And I know that they care about our products, M4. But I don't know what's happening to it. I don't know how long it's sitting on different shelves and that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I'm always constantly trying to find a way that we can be solely reliant upon our tap room. Would be my goal, because then, like you said, it allows us to be more present in our community, our direct community. And again, it goes back to, I try to emulate the people I worked for, and I know to give Camilla a shout out.
Yes.
Seeing the stuff that she did when I was working there, just even small stuff like how she would do nice things for the employees to everything she would do with the community has been something that I've always said would be great. But the thing is, you have to be making money in order to give back, otherwise you're just, and so there's been points when we've been able to do that. We did, we handed out meals with a food truck on Christmas Eve one time and stuff like that. But what I found is that the way for me to be the best community member I can be is to focus on what is right in front of me here, and that,
That was my thought always too, right?
Yeah.
That if I give of my time, it has to be to build the company in order to give the money, which is what the community actually needs. And once we got, not actually need, it is another thing that the community needs.
For sure.
And while we were doing that, Camilla was also running the pub and giving of her time generously. And that's hard, man. Like that's another, because it's a responsibility that a lot of people don't take on, and you don't have to, right?
And it can be a not very fun. You can be giving back, but also not be having the best interactions at the same time, you know. And
so yeah, it happens all the time. I mean, we give to, you know, we give primarily, as you know, to and work primarily with companies that support children in one way or another, right? So weekend survival kits and is our favorite, but all that stuff. Because we feel like, I mean, who can argue with that, right? I mean, it's what we, you know, it's what we want to be doing, right? It's feeding the kid is tough to make bad press out of that. But it is also the closest and most well-run charity here in town for us. But in any event, even having done that, and even having said, well, this is pretty vanilla, I don't think anybody can get angry about that. That's not true. They absolutely do, right? Right. And there's a certain kind of person who you and I both know growing up in, you know, Rust Belt, Midwest communities, who is, you know, who does believe that the world and their community is a zero-sum game.
For sure.
And if they're not winning everything, and if someone else is not losing at the same time, then they are somehow losing.
For sure.
You know, why don't you give me your money?
Yeah.
Right. You're not a kid. Right. But anyway, I think there are a lot of interesting paths to go down with community work and charity, and a lot to go down with breweries too. But in terms of, I kind of want to get back to the idea of how you came up in brewing and parallels to some of my favorite brewers and myself that I saw and see now in the way that you're working, which is, you said, you know, you had to hop around to get the spot that you wanted, right?
For sure.
So obviously that is, you know, millennia old, and they call that being a journeyman, right?
Yep. Yeah.
That's what that is. Right. I mean, we don't have a system for it here in the U.S.
I think that was my title, right? When I got hired.
Yeah, it was
journeyman brewer. Yeah.
Yeah. You were a journeyman brewer. I mean, essentially what that means is we'll pay you what we said we pay you, but we're going to put you wherever you fit. Right.
For sure. Yeah.
So I think, you know, that's something that I've found, you know, in the last 15 years has been not by everybody, right? But that's been abandoned. It's not really part of the brewer culture anymore, right?
For sure.
And I've said a lot that, you know, like difference between lager and crazy ales is the difference between classical music or jazz and punk. And I think that's true, right? Because I think there's a certain set of rules that you need to really learn and work within in order to make those traditional beers accurately that don't exist for those ales. It's not that one is better than the other. But sure. That idea of punk is the idea that, you know, you pick up a guitar and then you can change the world with it, you know?
Yeah.
And yep. You know, that kind of pervaded into the brewing community in the last 20 years or so, slowly, and then more quickly in the last 10. I don't think it's true. You know what I mean? I think that you have to work under somebody who is better than you for a while.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, and as you know, like when I got into the beer industry, my goal right from when I first started working at the gallery was I want to do this by myself one day.
Yep.
And so my perspective was always, how can I work under the person that's going to help me accomplish that goal?
Yep.
In the best way possible, you know. And so even when I got hired at Jolly Pumpkin, I don't think I fully understood kind of the magnitude of what Jolly Pumpkin was to the original American brewing scene, you know.
Huge.
But as I worked there, that's where just the culture there and the people that worked there cared so much about Jolly Pumpkin beer in particular, the craft beer scene as a whole, and then upholding what, you know, was kind of started there and kind of bringing that into the future, you know. And that's where I went from being like a casual beer fan that wanted to open a brewery to like, wow, I'm really interested in how we got here, you know, like, right. You know, and why, and is this going to be the thing that is this style that's a historic style? Let's talk about barrel aged wild beer.
Yeah.
Is this going to be something that's going to exist into the future, or, you know, where does this fit in? And I just really attribute my time at Jolly Pumpkin to me, if you want to call it like a hipster personality. Like I was just like, I want to do whatever is the coolest thing and the most kind of deep cut, I guess would be the thing, you know, like And it was such a great experience there because the other people working there with me cared about it so much. I mean, like, and it was pervasive. If we weren't at work, we were at each other's houses, bottle sharing and stuff like that, and part of that was because I lived by myself at the time and, didn't really have anything else to do,
Yeah, right.
But yeah, and I think that,
well, I mean, however the stars align, right?
Yeah.
You get to work for a guy in Ron Jeffries who is, I think, it's one of those yin yang things, right? Maybe genius is not the right word, but a real smart guy, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And really earnest. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep. And he was back to what I said about, working with yourself and Nate. Was Ron was brewing every day, and he was touchable. Like he was someone that I could personally go and ask questions to, and and he was on the floor with us and that kind of stuff. And then working for him, and then realizing, wow, this guy is kind of one of those kind of pillars of American craft beer in his own way. Yep. was really a cool experience because I was able to just walk up to him and ask him a question about something I had, whereas other people would have to listen to a podcast or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, working for Ron was really one of the first experiences for me where I saw kind of what I wanted to do in the future, which was what he was doing, which was he had his 10-barrel system, which is what he brewed everything on. And he would typically brew, I think he would typically brew Rojas and the more special Jolly beers, and I just thought, man, that's so cool. This guy, he's had this company for so long. He still enjoys it so much that he's in here with us, when he could easily be in Hawaii or whatever else he's doing. And, man, that was just something that was really, really, as a young kid coming into an industry and wanting to, like you said, sort of pay respect to the past, that was just, man, it just set me up for kind of success moving forward in that,
Right. Well, and somebody who's a role model for me too, Ron.
Yeah.
I mean, Ron had been around when I came into the industry 20 years ago, man.
For sure.
And I don't know for how long, but to me, it seemed like he'd just been here forever, right? Everybody knew Ron, right? Yeah. He was a crusader, right? I mean, he was one of the very few brewers. In any given snapshot of time, there's always only a couple brewers that are, I think, saying, you know what, fuck that, I'm doing this, and I'm going to be successful as I can with it. But there's going to be a point where I have to change what it is that I'm doing in order to become more successful. And I don't mean change it in terms of make a style that you don't normally make or whatever. Yeah. I mean, in terms of like saying, okay, well, fuck it, I'm going to sell out. Right.
For sure.
Which is a totally different thing, I think.
Yep.
But I do think that after that, you went, how long? It doesn't really matter how long you were at Jolly Pumpkin, but you went to New Holland for a while after that, right?
Yep. Yeah, I was at New Holland for about a year and a half, 2 years-ish,
And you were doing mostly cellar work?
No, I was doing cellar work, but I was basically running the brew house by myself.
Oh, shit.
Working, yeah. Which was, again, it's not the type of brewing that I ever wanted to do. That type of brewing is really similar to factory work, and
yeah.
And when I got hired, they made it very clear, don't think you're going to write a recipe here. You're not going to do anything creative. You're just going to be here. You're going to clock in, make your 100 barrels of beer a day, and then clock out, and
yeah, that's great. That's a smart idea. Abandon hope, all ye who
enter. And I think, just like the cultures at Old Nation and Jolly reflected the stance of, the owners in there working, enjoying it, that type of stuff. I think New Holland, in a way, struggled with culture a little bit for myself, because there was nowhere for me to be excited about, and I think that things have changed from what I understand there now to an extent, and so I'm happy to hear that. But
good.
But at the end of the day, it was the best experience I could have had, because I was just baptized in fire, if you want to say that. Like,
every day.
My first day there, they put me on the 50-barrel brew house and basically said, here's how to do it. I'll be up in my office if you want to come grab me for anything. And I'm just like, whoa, man, this is their brew house is a crazy brew house. Or at least at the time, it was a very convoluted structure. It was all automated, but just manual enough that it made it really, really.
Yes, right. Because you had to remember, right?
Yeah.
What do I have to? Right. I don't have to remember everything. It's
But
harder. It's hard to remember a few. It's harder to remember just a few things than it is to remember everything when you're in the process.
100%. And it was great. I mean, it was probably the most learning I ever did at any job, because there's no option not to learn, you know.
Right.
And the amount of beer that we were producing at that time there was a lot of beer, and and there were schedules, and so I'm so thankful for that time as well, because I think it showed me what that part of the industry is like, and it really made me comfortable with just the idea of brewing beer. You know, I mean, I think it can be brewing beer can be a very kind of scary the first couple times you do it, you know, at a production level, you know, and this just made me so comfortable with it that I was you know, I was excited to go out then and, you know, and learn more and expand my horizons, you know, and that kind of stuff.
I think that upon meeting a brewer, right, that you never met before, you can get a picture for whether or not they've had that kind of experience
for sure
or not right away, right?
Yeah.
They're much more humble. There's much more of like a graveyard humor vibe to the way they talk about beer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's blue collar work, man. That's
yeah.
It's a factory job, you know. And,
yeah, it is. It is.
And it's something I respect, you know. I wish that there was a union to represent the blue collar work that's being done, but
I do. I mean, as a business owner, it's stupid of me to say this, but I do too, because you know that, you know, for me, I mean, this is about making beer and making money and all the kind of things you're supposed to do when you own a brewery, but it's also selfishly benefits me, and I think benefits the community, to make sure that anybody who comes here, works, and leaves here represents a certain philosophy, if not a certain way of executing that philosophy. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah.
And I don't get out and talk about it much. I mean, I have the opportunity to, and I just don't, because I think there's so much flux in the brewing industry right now. I mean, at guild meetings, for example, you'd expect that, and they've asked me to do this, but I mean, I'm not going to do that in front of all those guys that have, you know, 3, 5, 7 barrel breweries, man. We are not serving the same master, you know?
For sure. 100%.
So I don't know, man. It's a weird time. And I guess having touched that kind of perspective and been a part of it in 2 different places. And by the way, I'm so happy to hear that you're making a Saison, because you made one with us, right? And it was awesome. It was great. And went right up through the pilot system into production. And I think you were a part of that process throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. And just to give you your credit where it's due, that process was such a light bulb going off in my head.
Right. It's not that hard.
Well, because, and that's what you kept saying to me, because I remember coming to you with the recipe, and you're like, well, what do you think? You know, it's not that hard, you know, like, you know what you're doing, do it. And that kind of was like, wow, man, if I can do that with these guys, I can do it on my own in my little own shop and be, 100%. You know, and that I still remember working on that recipe and how proud I was when it came out. I've made sort of a variation on that beer.
Good.
Not the same thing, but we made like a Brett version of kind of the idea of that. Because I really, it was such a special thing for myself and my career, you know.
Yeah.
Because that was the first time working for a production brewery where I was offered the respect and leeway to be creative, you know.
Right. Well,
and that's what I wanted the most, you know, and so
right. Yeah. And that was 2 old guys, you know, Nate and I sitting in the office going, I think Rake's going to get fucking antsy if we don't let him get a beer in, you know what I mean? And you were ready, obviously. And I mean, shit, we're not trying to come up with all the ideas, man. It's burdensome. You know, so to have somebody that was that on fire, that wanted to do it, that would just kind of have the guts to go for it. You know, the best thing to do in that situation is to be like, look, man, you're going to give this a rip. And if you fuck up, it's 10 barrels of beer. It doesn't matter. We'll try it again. Right.
Yeah.
And if you don't, that's what I expect. And, you know, we'll see how it goes. And I mean, that beer Saisons are infamously hard to sell on the market. It did okay. Yeah. But what I was most proud about was that it just was a good it was dry honey saison, right? Is what we ended up.
That's
calling
it. Yeah.
And the honey, and that's all the honey did, which is all honey actually fucking does, is dry out the beer, you know?
That's the hardest part, though. You put the honey on the label and people want it to be a sweet, even if you say dry right on the label.
And we did.
Not enough honey, you know?
Right?
Yeah.
Not enough honey. Those are my, dude, we can talk about that for that.
Oh, for sure.
But, anyway, I'm not to be too maudlin about it, but I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing. And I think it is awesome. And I want it to be as successful as possible. And you know that if there's anything I can do, you know, I'll be happy to. But I got my own, you know, kids and brewery and all that stuff, and I'm not always paying attention. So all I'd ask is for you to ask instead of wait for me to offer. So describe where in Muskegon you are, where you're moving into in the spring, and, you know, anything that you'd like to say to sell the brewery.
Yeah. So our current tap room right now in winter 2022 it's in the north end of downtown Muskegon, tucked around the back of a big building, kind of hidden away. It's kind of like a cool little underground beer club down there, you know. And we have, in the summer, we have a huge outdoor space that's beautiful. We do concerts and yoga, all sorts of events out there, and the space has been great. And over the last year or so, we kind of realized it was time to grow out of that space and find ourselves in sort of a more centrally located spot in Muskegon. And so we were able to find a space right downtown Muskegon, right in kind of the central part of downtown Muskegon, in a brand new building. It's going to be a brand new, you know, 6-7 story apartment building. And we're actually partnering with another local company, which is Rolling Stone Wood Fired Pizza, which to me, some of the best pizza in the state of Michigan. These guys are absolute maniacs about pizza. They are pizza nerds to the furthest extent, you know. And awesome. So I'm super excited. And so, you know, we'll have food. These guys are going to do their regular, you know, wood-fired pizza, all that kind of stuff, as well as a full menu. And
so I sit down in your bar, your new bar.
Yeah.
I grab a beer and I can get a pizza, and my ass doesn't have to leave the stool. Is that the deal?
Exactly? Yeah. Yeah. Which has been, you know, to be entirely transparent, that's always been our biggest kind of downfall at our current location. Is one, it's hidden away, you know. Two, we don't have the opportunity to have a kitchen in that space. And in a smaller time, especially in the smaller town, especially in the off season, people want food with their beer. And that was kind of what we realized and said, you know, let's go give people what they want. And we had already been collaborating with this pizza company since we opened, and we'd be doing pairings with them, but people would have to go get their pizza and then bring it down to our tap room. And so we've worked with these guys for years now, and it was just such a natural choice to kind of get them into a brick and mortar first and foremost, you know, kind of establish them in town, and then allow us to offer food through them.
And when do you wish then to open? I'm not going to ask when are you opening.
You know, it's the original idea was sometime in March or April, but we're really looking at kind of realistically in May. To open the new space. You know, there's obviously, as you know, so many things that go into that, which for us means all new licenses and everything, and that can take a lot of unexpected time, but we're on track to be on time. Okay. Like I said, the building's brand new, so there's a lot of, you know, the white box isn't even done on it yet, so there's a lot of stuff that has to fall into place, but we're hoping for May, because there's a lot of stuff that happens right in front of where we'll be at in the summer, and we really want to be there. You know, that's the goal, is to be there for that. You know, so yeah, so it's a super exciting thing, kind of nerve-wracking. You know, but
you do it and then it's done, right? I mean, it's one of those things. You know,
100%.
And that is, you know, it's rough, right? Some days or weeks when you're like, it's never going to be fucking May.
Right. When it is, I keep getting people asking me, what's new? Absolutely nothing. We're just waiting on architectural plans. We're waiting on the licenses. Yeah. You know, and it'll be that way until everything has to be done at once, you know. And,
right. Yeah.
And in a way, it's just like starting a brewery all over again, which is kind of fun. And for me, I look at it as kind of Rake Beer Project sort of growing up in a way, and kind of leaving the space. You know, we were strapped for cash when we opened. We didn't have any other options than our little basement dwelling spot that we're in now, and this is kind of us saying, you know, this is we've kind of had a couple of years to stumble and figure out who we are, and we're going to take all of that we learned into this new space with our beer, with our culture and our approach to customer service, all that kind of stuff, you know.
Well, everybody loves a winner, man, and it's good to see that you're growing and coming up. And like I said, I'll say it again. I'm proud of you and the work that you're doing, and I'm thankful that you stayed in Michigan and you kept this ethic in Michigan. And I have a sense that if this is going to work for anybody, it'll work for you. For whatever that's worth to you. And also in terms of in terms of resources, man, whatever, attorneys, equipment, whatever, it's at your disposal. If you need some help, you get in a pinch, you get in, if there's a bind or whatever, just let me know, and we'll jump in, no problem.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Travis. Can't tell you how much, man. Yeah. I
will. I'll look forward to talking to you soon, and I will keep my eyes open for the opening. Now that I know that Muskegon is cool,
yeah,
I will be there. As soon as I can when y'all pop the doors open. So I'm excited for you, and looking forward to seeing what's next for you, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me on, man. Great to chat with you. We got to do it more often.
Yeah, I would love to, man. We'll talk to you as soon as we can.
All right, that sounds great, man. Peace.
All right, later, dude. To get different perspectives on work, on philosophy toward work, and on the brewing industry specifically.
But for me, this was my way of trying to figure out how I could make that thing that I really like with the minimal equipment that I had myself.
Yeah, you would keep making the same thing over and over and over, and just little incremental changes here and there until you finally got it dialed into exactly how you wanted it and locked it.
Your first job as a brewer is to not give anyone a hangover they didn't earn.